philosopher.
What's up? Another episode of the Ripple Effect Podcast. I'm your host, Ricardo Ranz, also known as Ricky Ranz, and a great episode for you today. Today we have Chaney Nash. She's the host of Project Chaney. It's an amazing podcast. I recently was a guest on that show. Definitely check it out. It's a long-form conversation, and she goes deep into so many different topics and philosophies similar to this show. So if you like this show and you like those type of conversations, definitely check out Project Chaney. She's also not just an amazing host of her own show, but she's an amazing guest. She's one of those people you can talk to about so many different things and has such an intriguing way of looking at the world and willing to explore ideas and different perspectives. So it was a really, really fun discussion. And thank God, because I wasn't on my A game on this episode. From time to time, I don't know. I just don't feel like myself. I feel like mentally I'm lagging. I don't know if it's all the stresses of everyday life, work, the lack of sleep, all these things kind of catch up to me. And then it's hard to find that perfect time to schedule a podcast when you're limited on when you can schedule one. It's hard to find that perfect time on when you can guarantee that you're going to be at your best. But luckily, throughout the years of doing the show, I've got to meet so many interesting people like Chaney who bring their A game when I'm not on my A game. So you guys always have an amazing conversation to listen to and something thought-provoking. And she does an amazing job of analyzing herself and the world around us. So check out her links. It'll be in the show description. Also in the show description, like I always tell you guys, this is a Valley for Valley show. You'll find links to my new website, rickyvrans.com, or you can go to therippleeffectpodcast.com. Both URLs will take you to the same website. And at that website, you'll find a support link where it'll give you all the ways you can support the show. This is a Valley for Valley show. And when I say that, I don't mean necessarily financially. If you can financially support the show, great. If you can't, no big deal. Share the show, review the show, tell people about the show. I am still in YouTube jail, so feel free to upload my shows to YouTube. If you have a channel, start uploading them. My presence on YouTube keeps shrinking because they keep removing more videos and they don't let me upload or live stream while I'm in YouTube jail. So help people find this show on YouTube by uploading whatever episodes you want. So that way, if my show and my channel gets permanently banned, I still have some type of presence on YouTube and hopefully somebody will run into it there. With that said, also on my website, like I mentioned before, the support link will take you to a page that gives you all the ways to support in the show. I have a Patreon page, and everybody who does support my Patreon, thank you from the bottom of my heart. It is awesome that monthly everybody contributes to helping keep this show going. I mean, this show has thousands and thousands and thousands of downloads. It really has grown so much in the last couple of years. If everybody contribute a little bit, I could do this full time. If everybody contribute $1, I could easily do this full time. So if you're in the financial position where you can't contribute something, please do. I have a merch store with tons of cool shirts, hoodies, all types of stuff. And that's another great way of supporting the show, because you don't just support the show by financially contributing by buying merch, but you're also advertising the show on your shirt. And hopefully, if people like podcasts or people like the design on your shirt, hopefully they'll ask you, what is that? What's that shirt? And it won't be just a good conversation starter, but it will also be a great way of bringing up the show. So plenty of different ways of supporting the show. Merch, Patreon. I have a PayPal account if you want to donate that way. I have a crypto wallet if you want to donate that way. I have a Rockfin channel if you want to tip any show you like there or subscribe to my channel there. You can get all my video episodes on Rockfin for free. And also, if you guys are a fan of the Union Done Wanted, the other show I host with Sam Tripoli, Charlie Robinson, and Midnight Mike, subscribe to that Rockfin channel also, because what we do is we only stream live on our Rockfin channel. It's premium content for the first 24 to 48 hours. And then After that, we make it available publicly to everyone via our RSS feed or our Rockfin channel and Odyssey channel. So when we stream it live every other Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, it is premium content, but within a day or two, you'll be able to get it for free. And all the Ripple Effect podcast shows are available on Rockfin for free. You don't have to sign up. You can download the app. You can go on the website. And you can get all my videos for free on Rockfin. Most Rockfin channels have mostly free content and then some premium content. And you can use Rockfin as basically a YouTube alternative. You can go on there without signing up or anything like that. You can just watch videos. So check it out. See if you like it. Support the content creators that are on there, and many of them are. You have Ryan from Last American Vagabond, Whitney Webb, Abby Martin, Jimmy Dore, Richard Grove. Most of the guys that are regulars on the Union of the Unwanted, like Steve from Slow News Day and Grimerica guys, Charlie Robinson, obviously Sam Tripoli. So tons of stuff to check out. This intro is getting long, so I'm going to cut it here. Enjoy this conversation with Chaney, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace. Great. Well, thanks for being with me.
It's awesome. I'm excited.
How's your show going?
Fantastic.
Enjoying picking at people's minds and kind of getting to know their backstory.
Yeah, it's like a little different with everyone. I feel like I'm on this journey. So it seems to progress. I actually this week will be my first solo show that I just ran on a microphone and see how that goes for however long I do it.
You haven't done a solo show before?
Never. This is like even the show this time is like a big deal because usually I always have a co-host because I didn't want to fail alone. That's a part of the shit I've learned about myself in the last few months.
Yeah, well, doing a solo show is not easy. I just had a Ryan from the Last American Vagabond on, and I've had him on quite a few times, and I always tell him, I'm like, I don't know how you do those solo shows because to me, it's I don't know if it's a little bit of like imposter syndrome, but you feel like what do I have to offer? Like what am I going to say that's so profound that's worth only listening to me? We're in a conversation, like you said, it's kind of a journey where you don't know where the conversation is going to take you. Somebody's going to ask you questions, and it's going to bring up maybe some personal stories or philosophies. And when I'm just talking, I mean, I do a show on Rockfin called Ricky Rants on Rockfin. It's a solo show because I'm like, I don't know what else to do on Rockfin, but I wanted to do something premium because everybody from Rockfin's like, you got to do something premium. And so I'm like, I'm not going to, nothing's going to be behind a paywall in regards to the Ripple Effect podcast or the Union of the Unwanted. I want all that stuff to be free because the purpose of it is to create some ripple by sharing these conversations and interesting perspectives. So it wouldn't make any sense to do that, to put it behind a paywall. So I'm like, I guess my only other option is to do a solo show. And I hated it at first. And then and I still kind of do hate it. It's like there's times where you're flowing and you do have a lot to say and you have things on your mind and you've actually kind of gone through it in your head. And it's like, wow, I just did like 30 minutes or 20 minutes, no problem. And then there's other times where I'm like, I'm forcing it. Like, I don't feel like I have anything really interesting to share. But and then you see so many other podcasters and YouTubers, and everybody seems to be completely content with like not always having something super profound or interesting to say. But like for me, I feel like I'm just wasting people's time. And then it's more about quantity over quality, right? It's just like I'm just putting stuff out there, but like, is there any quality behind it?
Yeah, I have this piece of paper. I have this constitution, like a pocket constitution I carry around. And in it, every week, I put a like fresh piece of notebook paper. And anything that I find interesting or cool or comes up or an idea, sometimes it's like toys I used to play with when I was a kid. Sometimes it's movies I used to watch. Sometimes it's some weird deep dig I'm on about like Canaanites. And I just write it all down on this thing. And I started to take it to the intro of my show. And I had a goal on the first episode that as long as I could talk for 3 minutes, which I'll tell you, it took me at least a week of complete anxiety to grab the microphone and say, welcome to Project Chaney, like for the first time, like complete anxiety. Even though I had my first show recorded, it was like my part now, just me. And yeah, that was like the weirdest, but I forced myself to add minutes to it every week of just getting more comfortable. And I'm at this place now where I feel like my audience is this friend that I actually miss. And so it's like where if if this goes okay, which I'm not, I don't know why I feel like less than an hour feels like it's not content, but I'm like, but if I'm doing 2 shows a week, maybe sometimes 45 minutes will be fine. Um, I like hanging out with them. I like that they write me. I like that they tell me their crazy stories or their like really touching ones. And it also jogs stuff in me that I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't thought of that in years. I have to share that with all of them. And so it's like this friend collectively that I have with them. And I talk to it here and get to do it.
Well, it's weird because I mean, one of the cool things about podcasting is as you develop as a person, you're basically archiving different versions of yourself. So, like who I am right now, I'm archiving it in this conversation, and then like a little bit, down the line, 6 months from now, I'll be listening to myself, and I'm like, holy crap! Like my ideas have changed or my perspectives have changed. So it's you kind of have this arc these archives of like who you are in that moment and in that point in history. I remember when I had kids, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, how weird would that be if I had the ability to go back and listen to my dad doing a podcast for hours and him talking about like having me and going through fatherhood and that whole journey. Like I'm like, that'd be crazy. I mean, I couldn't even imagine just listening to him and seeing who he was, because a lot of times who we think we are, or maybe the way we remember things it's not quite factual. Some of it's fiction. Like you hear it all the time. Like you hear parents tell their kids like, oh, I was a good kid. I was a good kid. And then you hear from their friends like, no, he got in trouble or whatever, so sometimes you don't know if the way you remember yourself, if it's actually who you were. And because even looking back at myself and looking back at my initial podcasts, at like the first year or two, like there's a lot of ideas I thought I had that I'm like, I wonder if I was still feeling that way back then, if those are these new ideas, have they evolved, or was I, so it's like it's weird. It really is just this amazing ability to kind of see or archive like who we are and to share that with the world and know that like my kids are going to be able to, hopefully, if censorship doesn't completely erase us from history, they'll be able to go back and listen to me talk about them and kind of just the struggles of trying to figure out how to be a father. And I mean, even talking about the whole syndrome of imposter syndrome. I mean, same thing with parents. I mean, it's like you get imposter syndrome with parenting because I say this all the time on the show. So sorry, everybody who's heard me say this a billion times, but it's so true. Like when you're a kid, you look up at your parents like they have it all figured out, and they're they're full of wisdom and knowledge and experience, and they know what they're doing. Because a lot of times when you're being disciplined as a child, like they talk to you in like certain terms, like you do this, you do that, don't do that. And I'm like, okay, they're so certain about all the things I should be doing and not doing. So that means like they have it figured out. And then you become a parent, you're like, no, we don't have it figured out. Like we're all just making it up. Like not I mean, I shouldn't say there is no wrong way because there's plenty of wrong ways.
Yeah.
But there's also many right ways of parenting, and so there's not any one way. And really, that's really just in life in general. Like there is no one way of living your life, and I think that's a huge issue we have in America, where like we've kind of told everybody like success and the road to happiness is the same road for everybody. It's you get a high paying job, you get married young, you have kids, you basically invest all your time, energy into some career, and probably end up neglecting your kids and your family and your friends and your wife and your husband or whatever. And yet a lot of people end up going down that road and realizing like, okay, maybe maybe this isn't the way to happiness. Maybe we've been kind of tricked a little bit or misled on on this journey. And sometimes that's not right either, because there are people who've probably been down that road and are completely happy, or at least think they are. And but it's not, one size fits all. I probably should have ended that long rant with a question, but I'm sure you
No, I totally agree. It seems like parenting is a thankless job, and no matter how good you are at it, you're going to traumatize your child somehow. I think that is just a really weird effing thing to accept. And then there's going to be no matter what you do, no matter what, the world's still going to hurt your kid and break your kid's heart and go through, like, your kid's going to have to, it's not going to be the exact same thing you went through. And your goal is to make it less than you went through, but it still has to happen. Like, your kid's going to get battle worn, hopefully. Like, that's what's going to make your kid a deep kid. But your goal is to, like, I guess, give them the, like, thought process of how to work through all these emotions and work through the insecurities and work through the questioning. And I think doing this podcast thing too, one of the things I've just realized that we did to society somewhere, if somebody said something out loud, we just put their shoes, and put them in cement shoes and made them drowned with it just because it came out of their mouth aloud. And I think we should be allowed to put vibrations to our thoughts more. And sometimes, because I get the freedom of being able to talk by myself for 1/2 hour, I will start the conversation. I'm such a contrarian. I will disagree with myself by the end. And that's what we should be doing more. Like, and show people the process of that, and maybe show kids that it's not really a right or wrong if you don't know the answer sometimes. And sometimes there's things that no one knows the answers to, including your mom and dad.
Well, I've said it before and I'll say it again. That's why I love philosophy, because they're basically it's all just unanswered questions and debating unanswered questions, and never really coming to any real conclusion. It's constantly re-evaluating things, reflecting on things, debating things. And that's kind of the way we should be living our lives in general. I completely agree with you. The trauma thing is funny, because I just had John Paul Rice on, and that's something I said to him, and I've said it on the show before too. And it wasn't my idea. I heard Brian Callen say it once, like years ago, and it kind of stuck with me. I'm like, he's kind of right, man. Like, we're all gonna fuck up our kids a little bit, even if it's unknowingly. Like, we might think we're handling something correctly, or we might think like, okay, this child needs to be disciplined this way to get through to them, or this child needs to be talked to this way or that way. And you just never know how it's going to affect them, and long term what it's going to do to them. I mean, we all have weird memories in our lives where we're like, I don't know why that little conversation with that person stuck with me forever. And then there's other things, like you said, that we completely forget about until somebody brings it up, and you're like, holy shit, like that memory's been stored away for a long time. I haven't even tapped into that, and now all of a sudden they're coming. And sometimes I think that's trauma. I think some certain things, I know with myself, like especially if I'm being interviewed on another show and somebody's asking me things, like you said, like I'll say one thing or have one answer in the beginning of my long answer, and then by the end of the answer I'm like questioning if that's even my answer. And I'm like, I don't know if I have a solid stance on just about anything, but I think that's, like you said, that's okay. It's okay to put your ego aside, don't look at not knowing as a weakness or something like it's bad, but look at it as like, that's kind of life. Like, we can't be certain of anything, regardless if you're religious, spiritual, whatever it may be. And even with myself, like there's very few topics or subjects that I can say, like, I plant the flag here. This is where I think I'm going to be forever. And even those things, I'm like, well, I'm open to having my mind changed. But yeah, I think it's an exercise and a practice that people don't do enough of, is that self-reflecting and really questioning what they believe and why they believe it.
The whole Larry Gators of it all. I was thinking too just now, knowing, no, 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 you don't know that. You don't. You don't know anything. It's like the word "no," but it's like our brains don't know what we're saying. It's all the same thing. So it's interesting that the opposite of yes is no, and the opposite of what not knowing is no. It's just a weird word to utter out of our mouth for the same thing. It seems like the complete opposites. But maybe we have it all wrong. Maybe the idea of no, we should kind of say more in both. I don't know. Like it's just an odd phrasing to think you understand something and then say I know it.
That is weird. You know what's funny? I've never even thought about that. And now that there's so many weird things that we just accept. And then when you analyze it, you're like, doesn't make any sense. Like that doesn't, I don't get why we say this or why we do that. And I mean, God bless you is a perfect example. I mean, we still say it's like, bless you. I'm like, you're basically blessing somebody. You're telling somebody like, you know, you're protecting them, right? It was from the spirits or something that would come in.
Like I crossed you.
Yeah.
They thought you had a mini, you were just possessed with that sneeze. So I had to be like, whoa, shit, bless you.
I think it had something to do with like they thought when you sneezed, there was like a moment of weakness for spirits or demons to enter you, something like that. So you would say bless you to like protect them. I mean, so many weird things like that. And we just continue regurgitating it without ever really analyzing it. So
birthday cakes. They're moon god Artemis cakes that we put candles in and light on fire and then give her our wish once a year. And then the smokes rise to the heavens. And I just think it's funny when people talk about witchcraft or magic and they're like, oh, that's craziness. And I'm like, well, you take part in so much ritual. Whose ritual is it you're taking part in? You put this lit up tree in your living room and you call it one religion's, but it's another's. So who's really in control right now? It's a day that isn't the day of the person you called your savior. Who's really in control right now? What ritual are you taking part in? So I just think it's all crazy. I think it's all crazy in someone's ritual, someone's sigil, someone's intent, someone's symbol, and you're just like running around doing that thing. I don't know what it is. Well, like we're like church.
With a rabbit behind you, it'll lead to my probably my first question in 20 minutes. And what led you down the rabbit hole? What was the first? I mean, was it? I mean, like most of us, I'm sure it was a bunch of things. But what were those bunch of things possibly that made you look at things not just from above the surface, but dissect them and really analyze things in a way that you do now?
I really believe this brain and thought process. I have to give credit to Inquirer magazine. I think that's the first thing in my life that was just around my grow up that everything in it, the older I got, the more things I remembered. I'm like, well, the Inquirer said that years ago. The Inquirer said that years ago. The Inquirer said that years ago. And then around 2002, right after 9/11, all this stuff's kind of fresh in my brain. I had my own trauma from it. One friend, maybe 2002, 2003, somewhere really close right there. I got one friend gave me the Gods of Eden. He was like on some trek on his way to India, like total kind of like hippie punk rock guy. One of my girlfriends, like preppy lady friends, gave me the Da Vinci Codes to read. And my one buddy who just got out of jail, who was just kind of getting his life back together, gave me Upon a Pale Horse. And I ended up with these or like books all in the same 30-day period of time. And I think something about reading them all, it broke my brain. And yeah, I don't think my path down the rabbit hole was slow. It was like my studious academia brain. It found something that it was so juiced up about. And there were so many different roads and an infinite amount of ties and an infinite amount of people to know and dates to know. And it was like this permanent college that I really got off on just constantly needing to know or connect another dot or another. And I mean, it's probably, it's been almost 20 years. It's like another, we're living through all the stuff that we screamed about and wanted to wake everyone up about. And I mean, I never thought I'd see this many people awake.
So did you end up getting into like any content creator that really got your attention afterwards once you started going down those rabbit holes? Like which researchers or podcasters or documentary filmmakers really got your attention?
Alex Jones, of course. You have to give credit to everything about the InfoWars channel. And the bigger it got, he started to attach all these links. I had this buddy who was into color revolutions and really teaching me about it. He was an old school conspiracy theorist that like had maxed out his credit card once to do the whole conspiracy of AIDS versus HIV and he was just next level. And so he would just every other day at work hand me these books and hand me these things. And like I was lucky to have these two brilliant dudes around me that were both a little older than me, just like keeping any time I was dumb too. They didn't like really put me down. They were just like, man, keep looking here. Every time I thought I was like, oh, I got it. They were like, okay, everybody gets to that point. Here's the next thing to research. And it was kind of when those conspiracy guys came around that there was tinfoil hat, and that was fun for me to watch on YouTube and hear like I liked Eddie Bravo. I was always a huge fight fan. So I kind of followed Eddie over to tinfoil hat. Unlike most people that found tinfoil hat and then Eddie, I just knew who Eddie was from like the whole Gracie of it all. And so with tinfoil hat being this funny thing and then finding those conspiracy guys with this long format, it was those conspiracy guys JP Morgan episode that did something for conspiracies with me, that it was so detailed and attached something in this octopusy way that I never kind of, it made me step back even further than I ever had before. And it was this whole nother layer, like the way Gordo did it and the details that he put into it. It almost made me want to re-look at every single thing I'd ever read already. Everything I thought I knew about 9/11, everything I thought I knew about, like, whatever, Boston bombing, or even bigger conspiracies, religions, Catholicism. It was like, oh, I have new eyes now. It was like he was a professor, like a doctorate, where I only had a, bachelor's before.
Well, you just had him on, so that must have been pretty cool.
Yeah, it's totally full circle. And I knew he was going to be my 22nd episode, and it's weird how it worked out because of the corona virus of it all. I had this small list of people I wrote down that I knew I was going to have on, and it was kind of like I knew I needed to have some kind of chops before I sat in a room across from Gordo, like, because I respect his comedian and he's fast, but I also had to get my ego to a place to realize, like, wow, like a good guest, you can kind of just let him go. And he's a great guest. And so it was that too. Like, instead of feeling like I have to tell Gordo this, let me fill him in on this. It was nice to just be able to sit back and not feel small around somebody so grand.
Yeah, it's well, Eddie Bravo, to go back to that, I mean, it's funny how many people got into my show from Tinfoil Hat and just all those connections from, because I'm like, I've been doing it since 2013. I remember having Eddie Bravo on when he was still doing Eddie Bravo radio, and this was like way back in the day. And he had Ryan Dawson on. I had Ryan Dawson on back in the day. I'm trying to think. Oh, he had Sean Stone on. I was a fan of Sean Stone. Like, it's weird because it's like I feel old sometimes because I'm like,
you are a G. Like, you're definitely one of the shows in my podcasting. Like, if I flip through my podcast that I listen to, it was so great when it was like starting to expand and the idea was getting bigger. And yeah, you were just doing something totally different, but then also you were a person with Eddie. Like that, I think I might have found your show through Eddie too. I think I found a lot of conspiracy people through Eddie.
Yeah, he's cool because he similar to Rogan, he brings in people from different from different backgrounds and different perspectives. So people who might know Eddie from his music because he had a smoke serpent, which was pretty cool.
I never knew that Eddie. I didn't find out about that Eddie for a couple of years after, like, after the Eddie I thought I knew because I knew Fight Eddie.
Yeah, 10th Planet Eddie. Yeah, he's when I had him on, I think we talked a lot about music and jujitsu, and then of course we end up talking about conspiracies because how do you not? But at that time, this was way before Flat Earth. But super cool guy. But yeah, some of these guys, I mean, that's the thing about Eddie. Like people know him as like, oh, the flat earther. I'm like, he's been deep into conspiracies for a long time. I mean, he got Rogan into a lot of conspiracies. You go back and you listen to early JRE shows, and they're going deep into topics. I think a lot of it was because he felt like he had the freedom and flexibility because he didn't really have any influence in the world. Where now it's like every single word he says, people are hanging on it and looking for a reason to criticize him and call him a anti-vaxxer or a this or that. And so I think he's much more cautious about what he says, and because he understands the I guess the influence and the just the power that show has. But back in the day when they could just openly talk about it, it was wild. I remember listening to him. I mean, he had quite a few like guys that you consider conspiracy theorists on the show, when they would go, they would talk about the Clinton body count. They would talk about, so many different false flags and all these type of.
I thought the Fight Companions, to me, I thought the way it was done with Brian Callen, because Brian Callen knows everything about the 3D world. He is legit an intelligent MFer. He's well read. He knows all that shit to ask the right questions that normal people would ask. And so when he was on with Eddie, I always felt like if Brian and Eddie had a show, that would be the show I would watch all day, every day. And because Brian's smart enough to ask the questions that need to be asked to actually drop the red pill. And I loved Brennan Schaub on the show because he always had the can opener to the lid, even if Joe didn't want it, even if Jamie was trying to keep like, nope, we got to keep the sponsors happy. Like, nope, somebody has a headache. Here's some mushroom tea on the table. Bring that up, or whatever weird shit's going on behind the scenes. But Brennan would always be like, so what about this Pizzagate? Pop in the middle of like the 6th round of a Tony Ferguson, like, or whatever, 2nd round of a UFC fight. And I was just like obsessed with those shows because the drunker they got, the realer it got. And Eddie, at first, he'd be like, I'm not going to bring this up. I'm not going to bring this up. Hour 3, he was saying stuff that at that point on shows, no one was saying it. He was the first guy on any mainstream, anything that said Pizzagate. He was the first guy. And even with the flat earth stuff, it's every single flat earther I know knows way more about the globe than every single person that just blanketly believes in the globe. So it's just like, back to that little kid thing. You want to teach your kid how to think, not what to think. And if you can't answer all those questions about the globe and you just blanketly believe what, Nazis are telling you, if you can't answer them for yourself, then that there is a problem. And it's weird to me that, no matter how weird the subject is, usually the conspiracy theorists know more about the other part of it. And so that's what I always liked about Eddie, is maybe it was because he could choke everyone out in the room at any time, but he just was always chill and never minded standing alone, even when no one else was saying the crazy shit yet. But I even remember that first show when Joe first brought up Flat Earth to Eddie, and Eddie was like, Joe, stop, rewind. You're telling me people out there believe the earth is flat. Like I remember him like, I can't even. And so it's like to have him now be like, he's bigger than Eric Dubay. If you think of flat earth and you think of Eddie Bravo, I just think, cool. Maybe you needed to learn that kind of shit to just be able to ask the question. Why can't the question be asked? Like, it should be able to be asked.
Well, that's like even him questioning dinosaurs or space or any of that stuff. Like so many things are so quickly dismissed. And I'm like, isn't that how we can get we can fall for this trick? Isn't that how we can be lied to for so many years? Is by just assuming somebody's looked into it, that and we'll just keep repeating it, and we'll assume it's so ridiculous to question it that we'll just keep repeating the whatever the lie is. So I'm all for asking all those questions and questioning all that stuff. I mean, nothing that we've been told should, we should assume, especially if it comes from the elite or the school system or whatever, these scientists or whoever it may be, historians who all have agendas and all have maybe people who disagree with them that have been suppressed. So all that stuff happens. I mean, the fight companion, it's funny because I love the fight companions and I was a fight fan. I still am, but I actually listened to them hoping they didn't talk about the fights for the same reason, because they would go down all these rabbit holes. And I know that if you get Eddie Bravo in the room for 1 hour, maybe you can get him to not talk about conspiracies, but it's just a matter of time, like 2 hours, 3 hours in, that it's going to be brought up. And like you said, Brendan Schaub would usually be the instigator, because Rogan would try not to bring it up and get in those debates. And Brendan Schaub was pretty neutral. And a lot of these guys probably are talking before the show, or just text messaging each other like articles and things that they're looking into. So I'm sure like Brendan Schaub's like, I want to get Eddie's take on this, or I want Eddie to bring this up because he just texted to me and I want to see what Joe says or whatever. So, but the beautiful thing is they're all friends, and there was moments where they legit seem like they're getting mad at each other. Like there's one or two shows where like I'm like, oh shit, like they're like legit getting mad. I'm like, that's the
I
type.
never seen Rogan mad at anyone like Eddie. I never seen him mad at somebody like he got, where it's like, holy shit, he is yelling at Eddie Bravo. And I would also see him and Jamie corner Eddie, where I'm like, it's not even because I agreed with Eddie or disagreed. I just was like, damn, I hate calling people just blanket shills, but I'm like, young Jamie, you got CIA in your earpiece, because shut the fuck up and let Eddie finish his point. You're like attacking him with some, I got my degree, I learned it in school. And I'm like, I hate when people just argue with this. Like, really, dude, did you really take this in college? Is that what you really did? And so
Well, a lot of
I,
people that are
yeah,
lying to us have degrees. I mean, Dr. Fauci has a degree. It doesn't mean that they can't lie to you. And
Hillary Clinton's a lawyer.
yeah, I mean, and a horrendous, but I mean, who did horrendous things. Yeah, I mean, it boggles my mind when people try to. It's like, let's just stick to the facts. I don't care what your resume is. I don't care how many plaques you have on the wall. We all have access to information now. I mean, we don't live in the 20s or the 30s where universities were the one place where you would have access to the best professors and books and information and education. Now it's like I can go online and look up anything. I mean, I've never stepped foot in a college, and I've had plenty of professors on the show and PhDs. I'm not saying I'm smart. I'm just saying that like I'm at least capable of having conversations with them and talking to them about their expertise, because I also have access to that information. So like when people talk about their, I have this, or I went to school for this, I'm like, okay, great, but what do you know? Like, because a lot of times it means that you've also been brainwashed, because I've ran into this information because I was exploring, I was looking for answers. I might have run into many different perspectives. One person taught you. It's almost like I'm going to use the metaphor with guitar, because it's similar with guitar playing or any instrument. Like one person taught you how to play guitar, you've adopted their style even if you don't know it, because they're teaching you how to play the way they were taught how to play. And the person who teaches themselves will have a much more unique look at things and come up with a much more unique style. So it's similar to schools and colleges. You go to school, you go to colleges, the professor kind of pushes, even if it's not intentionally, they will push their philosophies and their perspectives onto you. I mean, I see with my kids where they'll repeat things I say, like just opinions I have on certain things. Somebody will bring something up, and my kids will be like, "Yeah, my dad thinks Corona is bullshit," or whatever, and I'll have a conversation with them because I want to make sure that if they agree with me on anything, it's because it makes sense to them, and it's not just because it's coming from me. Like I don't want anybody, like I don't think it's healthy to agree with somebody. Another example is it's hard. Like I have to do a better job of like gathering all my thoughts. I'm like, I want to say this and I want to say that.
I'm totally on the train. I'm totally following you.
But it's similar to like when Joe Rogan was taking the lockdown seriously and the coronavirus thing seriously. It was I had people like, oh, you like Joe Rogan, he's taking it seriously, and I'm like, I like his show. I agree with him on a lot of things. It doesn't mean like I don't even understand what how people can say things like that, because I'm like, do you agree with somebody all the time? And do you agree with somebody just because you respect them or you like their work? Like, no, like you should be looking at these ideas and completely open to disagreeing with somebody. I think too often when it comes from the mouth of somebody they like or appreciate, then it influences how much or how important that information is. It's like it sounds more profound because it's coming from somebody I like and respect. And to me, it's like that's something you have to kind of pump your brakes on. Like you have to analyze, like, okay, am I taking this stance because people I like and people I think are intelligent are taking that stance, or am I taking that stance because I've analyzed the information and I've come to that conclusion? And all this kind of goes back to what we're talking about in the beginning of the show. I mean, just the importance of constantly analyzing what, not just what you believe, but why you believe those things. Because a lot of times it's like finding the origin story of your beliefs is really important. Like, I have guests on and I'm like, okay, share your origin story. But like a lot of times I'm saying that in regards to people, but you should use that same technique to, just kind of analyzing somebody's origin story. You can learn about them. Well, you can use that same technique to analyze the origin story of whatever idea you may have. And then you can start figuring out like, okay, was this organically grown, or was it, is there a bunch of Monsanto pesticides? Is it?
Yeah.
Have I
Am
been,
I vax injured?
yeah, it's like, is there all these other influences? Because I mean, obviously, most of my listeners, and of course, you know the history of Edward Bernays and all this stuff, and I bring him up not because specifically he's linked to what I'm saying, but because it's a example of how much is influencing our thinking and our decision making, and we're not even aware of it. And so figuring out what the origin story of a idea is, well, sometimes while dissecting why I believe something or why I think something, you realize like, oh shit, like I got here and I didn't really think it out, or I didn't really look into it, or I didn't. It happens actually, like you were saying before, it happens a lot with people from the other perspective, people who usually disagree with conspiracy theorists, the people who are trying to debunk conspiracy theorists. You talk to them and they're usually much more emotional and much less factual. They haven't really looked into it, but they'll have a very strong stance and they seem to be very attached to whatever beliefs they have. So like vaccines is a perfect example. You debate somebody or get in a conversation with somebody who's very pro-vaccine, they'll be very pro-vaccine, not because of their own research and their own thinking or their own doing. It's because the media and the world around them and the communities around them have conditioned them into believing and believing and regurgitating that vaccines are safe and effective. Vaccines are safe and effective. There's no link to vaccines and autism. Vaccines don't harm people. Vaccines don't kill people. Like they're just regurgitating these things, and they don't actually like. And if they analyze their origin story of those ideas, it'll lead them where, like they'll find out like, oh shit, I've never even really looked into this. Like it's not even something I've ever even researched. And the things that people are bringing up, like the CDC whistleblower, or the fact that as we vaccinate our children more with more and more vaccines, there's also a correlation with the increase of autism and allergies and all this stuff. So there could be something there. The metals and thimerosal, the mercury preservatives that are in vaccines, like all these things that people they don't even know about. So I just think it's really important to do that, like figure out like why I believe what I believe. And too often I think we get married to a idea, and then we feel the need to have to defend it till the end of time, because that's like, I don't want to be wrong, but I'm so much like you, where I'll be asked a question, and in the process of answering it, my answer will change, and I'll realize, like, okay, maybe I haven't thought it out, maybe I need to think about this more. And I think people just don't do that.
Or sometimes the craziest, there's two yeses where you play something out and you're like, holy shit, I see both sides of this thing. I see both sides of this coin. I could argue both sides. I could give better marketing to both sides. I see both. I was going to ask you how much, like in your digs, do you rely on your intuition? Is there ever something that you're just like, I don't know why I wanted to look here, or I don't know what made me look at this, or I don't know, like, holy shit, I read like an 2-hour book on that specific subject and I wondered why I was reading it then. And now you have all this other stuff where it's like this thread. Is there any of that, or is it all logic?
I don't know if it's all, I think a lot of it's just motivated by me just learning that understanding the world around me sometimes means going down some really weird rabbit holes, and sometimes some things that aren't even rabbit holes. Like, I remember when I went down like this, or I was in this big World War I kick. This is way before James Corbett did his documentary, which is really good on World War I. But I felt like, wow, that World War I, like, that gets so neglected.
James Corbett, awesome. He's one of the dudes in like the OG, like
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
so great.
He was one of my first guests, and he was a big influence of mine when I started. I mean, that's how I got the whole idea of like doing open source, from like, hey, people, like, post my shows anywhere, share it anywhere. And people do. Hopefully people start doing that on YouTube, because I'm pretty sure I'm on my second strike for another, I don't know, a week or 2 weeks or whatever. But there's a good chance that it's going to be, probably the channel will be removed eventually. So people, if you're listening, post it on YouTube. I don't care. Post the whole show, post a clip, do whatever you want. Give the show a presence on YouTube. And it's funny because I tell people, like, do that, whatever. I don't care. You're not stealing. I'm telling you to just share the conversation. And on BitChute and Odyssey, my shows are on there, but there's like a bunch of other channels that are also uploading my shows, and they have more views and more subscribers than I do. And which is hilarious, because it's like it's my show that they're both, but I don't care, because I'm like, that just means people are watching, and I'm like, I don't, people are listening to the shows. And what the hell were we just talking about? I've lost my train of thought.
Intuition.
Yeah. Oh, so World War I, right? So World War I, I'm just like, there has to be something important about that historical event. I'm like, and so one thing you find is, like, when you go down these weird rabbit holes, and you go, even if it's a historical event like World War I, I'm like, this story's been neglected so much. I mean, everybody talks about Nazi Germany, everybody talks about World War I, people talk about Vietnam, even the Korean War, which is kind of considered people call it the forgotten war. But World War I mean, there's just not. I'm like, what is it? Is it not as sexy? Is it not as current? But then you look into it, and you find out about carving up the Middle East and the fall of the Ottoman Empire and how it happened. And I remember running into a really good documentary called Promises and Betrayals, I believe is what it's called. And really went into like all the backdoor dealings and all this stuff, and how, like, and that's a beautiful thing about history. It's when you really find something significant, you realize how much more sense things that are happening now makes to you. Like, you're just like, holy shit, like, I understand the Middle East way better after like discovering the fall of the Ottoman Empire and the Sykes-Picot Agreement, and how the French and the British carved up the Middle East and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay, but it was one of those things where I'm like, I don't know why, but I feel like it's significant for me to understand World War I, to understand like just other foreign policy and geopolitical issues. And so yeah, I guess that would be like a example of, like, I don't know why I was attracted to that. I mean, sometimes it's just because I don't know anything about it. So people will bring something up, and I'm like, I don't know jack shit about that topic, and I'm like, let me kind of go down, same thing with, like, I remember I had his name's what's his real name? I forget what his real name is, but they call his nickname's Yap, and he's the singer of 1 Minute Silence, which is a band that I like to describe as the Irish Rage Against the Machine. And I think we're way better than Rage Against the Machine because they just, I mean, I learned so much history from listening to them growing up. And I remember like they would write stuff and like have certain dates or something in their songs. And I'm like, what the fuck's that? Like, what is that referring to? So I'd go look it up. I'd be like, okay, let me see what he's talking about, you know? And now you would learn about some of the Irish history and you know, internal politics of Ireland. And, you know, like I learned why Ireland and Northern Ireland are two countries and you know why they hate the Brits and the you know the Catholics and the Protestants, why they don't like each other, all these things. And I just found, you know, that so fascinating, like just talking to people or when I had him on, just talking to him and just what the hell was I getting to? I swear I was making a very good point, which now I've kind of lost my train of thought. I brought him up for a reason. Oh, I maybe he was one of the first people that exposed me to World War One. That might have been the link there. But oh, that's what I was getting to. He would bring up certain. I remember when I talked to him, he would bring up certain things that I didn't know about. He would talk about certain philosophers that he liked that were really influential. And my first thing I want to do, my first desire after finishing the podcast is looking those things up. Like, okay, who's this really influential philosopher that I've never heard of that he likes a lot? Let me look into it, you know. And some people just don't give a shit. Like if I say something, like there's times where I will say things to my wife and I'll be like, oh, you know, she'll be like, oh, we'll be talking about whatever the podcast topic was. And I'm like, yeah, we did a show on this or whatever. Blah, blah. And then I'll wait and I'll be like, wait, she doesn't even know what that is. And I'll be like, I'm like, hey, do you even know what whatever it is? And she's like, no. I'm like, but you didn't ask. And she's like, yeah, you know, like she didn't care. And I'm just like, wow, that's so absurd to me. Like to me, that's so foreign because if I don't know something, my first reaction is to ask, like, what is it? Like, or let me look into it, you know, and ask questions. And some people are just completely in the other direction where they don't know something. And if it's not intriguing, like they just assume it's not intriguing. Like I assume it is intriguing. Like if I don't know it, let me discover a little bit more information about it and figure out if it is something really interesting. Other people, it's like, well, if I don't know what it is, it's probably not interesting. So I just ignore it. I mean, do you find yourself doing that where like, if you listen to a show and they bring up a historical event or a historical person or something that you've never heard of or you haven't looked into before, you want to learn more about it?
Oh yeah, like totally. It could be just flippant, like people talking about the Beatles, talking about the Beatles, talking about the Beatles. And then somebody's like, yeah, but George Harrison, though, is really a lot better than John Lennon. And I'm like, what the? I remember this would be one of those weird things, like where I'm like, who could even say that? Why would you even utter that phrase out of your mouth? And because I'm such a contrarian and I just want to prove everything wrong, including myself always. Like I just don't think anything really holds water. But then I always find like the journey is so great. And then I fell in love with George Harrison. And then I don't even remember where I heard that once. And I'm like, he is by far the best Beatle. And yeah, it could just be something silly like that, or it could be I was on a podcast and I'm a constitutionalist. I love the Constitution. I love the United States of America. And, you know, I know people that are pro anarchy, and I don't really get down like that. I'll look into whatever you want me to look into. I just, on a small scale, I just think there needs to be rules sometimes. I know the idea of sovereign and I get it, but just maybe because I'm a woman, or maybe it's because I think about children, that sometimes there's bad things out there and there has to be rules so that we don't have to worry about those bad things all the time and someone's going to take care of it and whatever. My little idea of a village and how this is a big village and the Constitution is an okay article for that. And somebody said, but have you ever really read the Articles of the Federation? And I'm like, no, or I had, but not long enough that I was out of my scholastic brain of what date was it written, who wrote it, like all these silly things that you have to know without really feeling it or understanding it. And so it was definitely one of those, like, totally going to look into it. Like, how could I ever say it again if I don't know that one, though? Like, really know it, like the same way I know this one. And I feel like that's why I learn about every religion. How could, if you believe there's a source energy, how can you talk about that if you don't know what language that everybody speaks into? Or if you don't believe there's a source energy, how could you talk about that if you don't know about the source that you're trying to? I don't know. I think even in the argument, I want to know what their side is. And then something over the last like 6 year, I would say, the more empathetic I've gotten in my own, like, probably chakra alignment or whatever woo woo. I want to feel why people feel the way they feel. I want to really understand it. I don't want to just hear their facts. And so sometimes it's little questions that I'm like, that maybe have never been asked. And so if I listen really hard, there's like an inflection with certain things they say, or something that they want to talk about or their spirit wants to talk about, but my intuition's kind of telling me that that wants to happen. And if I am like plugged in and just chill and maybe in a flow state in a way that athletes talk about, that's what I feel like this microphone stuff does. Sometimes you just get in this flow state. Like when you were saying recording by yourself, sometimes you feel forced. Sometimes you walk away and you just feel like if there was such a good thing as the perfect workout or the perfect therapy or the perfect sex, sometimes you walk away from the microphone and you're like, holy shit, I was in flow state the entire time. And I don't even care what I said because I was plugged in and you knew you were. And, or sometimes you're really lucky and you have another person in the room and you're like, holy shit, we were both plugged in that whole time. Like I could feel their energy and they could feel mine. And then we were both attached to something bigger. And I don't even know where the conversation went, but it felt right. And, yeah, that was the weird thing of me looking up stuff that I hear on other podcasts. But yeah, I have to look up everything. I have to question everyone. I want to know it all. I want to feel it all. I want to have this huge Christ experience. I want the crown of thorns. I want the nails in my palm. I want to hang there while the vultures circle over for 3 days. I want to feel my entire life and my entire death. And maybe everybody else's too. That's kind of, it's so intriguing. I don't understand how everyone doesn't want to know it, whatever it is.
Yeah, I think everybody has a story, and one of the things I loved about being single when I was going out was meeting people, and it wasn't even about like trying to pick up a pretty girl or just like having a random hookup or whatever. Like, not that those things aren't fun. The thing is, like, I actually, and my friends would like make fun of me because they didn't think I was being honest. Like, I actually enjoyed picking them up, like meeting somebody and then just dissecting their brain and their story and who they are and where they're from and all those things. And you know, you can do the same thing with like meeting dudes or whatever, but obviously that's a little more awkward if you're at a bar. Just
Hey buddy, what's your favorite sports team?
Exactly. And so it is you know, it just, I felt like even when somebody at the first like 5 minutes or the first glance seemed like a very surface level, like nothing interesting about them type of person, like you talk to them and you talk to them and you talk to them, and little by little you start dissecting who they are and what they've been through. And this kind of goes back to what we're kind of hitting on before about like the whole imposter syndrome thing, is that a lot of times, like, you think like, okay, I need a PhD or I need to be a really popular content creator or musician or have done something amazing for me to have something worth listening to. But the truth is, the most average of people, or people that seem average, can have inspiring stories and stories that you can take something from, and life experiences you can take something from. And you know, you learn from your mistakes, but you can also learn from other people's mistakes. I'm having such a hard time talking today. I swear, when I do legs at the gym, speaking of Rogan said this like a couple years ago, that when he does legs, he feels like cognitively he's like not as sharp. And this is like the third or fourth time I've done legs and done a podcast the same day. And I'm like, I swear all my legs, all my blood is going to my like calves and my hamstrings and my thighs, and my brain's like starving for blood, like send blood up here. But anyways, but yeah, I feel like everybody has a story. Everybody has something that you can learn from, whatever that story is. And that's one of the beautiful things of podcasting, is that you're kind of capturing that, and you're sharing it with people. And some of the most interesting conversations I've had, and I'm sure you probably will say similar things, isn't necessarily with people that you thought were going to be the most interesting people, right? Is that you ever get to, you ever talk to somebody where you're like, okay, like
yes, I started my whole show for that reason. All the people that I expected to, because I wanted all their knowledge and all their fucking I'm all their I wanted all their everything they learned. I wanted all that. That's what I thought I wanted a show about. But somewhere in doing one of my old shows, there was a specific guest, and I don't know what it was. I think it was my intuition, but I knew that there was a I just like, it's like sometimes when I plugged in, it's like every other word is going to be like cussing. Like I knew that there was so much more of a story there that I needed to hear, that I had to like contour my whole show to figure out a way to hear that from everyone. And but it was that feeling of like, I'm not doing justice right now. I need to follow that question, and this isn't the format to do it. So yeah, I totally somebody just like that, the most unassuming guest that would like, I don't have anything to teach you about conspiracy. Like I that thought all those things, like 2 questions into the interview, I was like, holy shit. Like even myself, I was like, this person has so much to teach me. And it's not about conspiracy at all. So yeah.
Where'd you grow up?
I was born in Palm Beach, Florida, which is probably why having the Inquirer as a Bible, that's where the Inquirer is out of. And that's also why it is like DJT is like RJFK Jr. You know, he was our always local celebrity my whole growing up. So yeah, I'm born in Palm Beach and grew up in Florida, Vero Beach.
Yep.
Yeah, I spent all like half of my life on the West Coast in Los Angeles and in Portland, Oregon, and then made it, you know, right back to the East Coast, back to Florida. I felt like that the girl walking out of the building as it blew up behind her, because I was so content being in Florida for the first time in my whole life. And I did not know that the world was going to shut down behind me. And I was a West Coaster. I thought I was going to live there my whole life. I was like, you know, a Portland liberal lesbian with a chicken coop. I would have probably been pulling down a statue in the street with a mask on or something. I'm just kidding. I would have never, I was already like, quote unquote, like conspiracy theorist when I lived there. But it would have been shitty to have a whole community of liberal lesbians and be the only one standing with a MAGA hat on. That became the gayest thing you could do. It was like the most punk rock thing you could do was put that red MAGA hat on.
It's amazing how many people I thought were punk rock, which they're not anti-authority. They're just anti whatever political authority they don't like. And it's definitely a problem. When you were living in California and Oregon, did your political views, and or maybe just your, not so much only politics, but the way you look at the world change being there? Did you because you seem like the type of person that you're always trying to find middle ground, right? So even if you're surrounded by people you disagree with, you'll have the desire to try to understand them. And so when living there, well, actually, when you moved from Florida to the West Coast, did you have West Coast type of ideologies and perspectives, or?
I had Michigan College in between. because I thought snow was going to be billowy and comfortable to live in. So I had this like fantasy of like, I'll move up to Michigan. And I think that gave me like a little bit of a like liberal legs to understand what I was getting into before I went to Los Angeles. It like gave me a nice little cushion of like, oh, I don't have it all right. Oh, there are minorities that have struggles on this planet. Like there was definitely a whole of part of the liberal mindset that there is a lot of truth in it. That's why they can put all these really evil legs underneath it. And I didn't see any of that. I thought like the idea that any one human being in the country didn't have the same, like because of everywhere I'd been in my life and I never had a handout or a hand up, I just didn't. I remember just being ignorant to the idea that we all had the same shake and very naive to the fact that, I mean, just the fact that my mom could get me braces gave me a better shake. The fact that I had white skin gave me a better shake. The fact that I could, maybe have somebody to call to get $100 if I needed it gave me a better shake. Like all these little tiny things. I think that part of the liberal college definitely just gave me enough eyes to not get myself into some kind of craziness. When I first moved to Los Angeles, I worshiped at the Church of Hollywood. I was total in heathen zone. It was drugs and sex and rock and roll and no commitment to any part of the country or any part of myself or any part of spirituality. It was just like, famous people and clout and that idea of the American dream, which I definitely feel like is that fame chase is one part of America. And people don't like to admit it, especially in our field, like in podcasting, that there's still part of that clout chase, but it's almost like a drug I got to taste enough to realize I never wanted to do it here. Like I never wanted to Hollywood up my podcast life. And there's parts of podcast life that, I don't know, just are a little, they give me reminiscent things of stuff that happened in Hollywood. And it always makes me step back again and like reevaluate, make sure I'm staying true to me, making sure that it's still the direction I want to take and making sure like my road feels clean and authentic and never feeling forced, rushed, or entitled anywhere. And I'm grateful that Hollywood gave me the muscles to now have authentic, feels with standing alone. It's a cesspool. Anyone that's been in any kind of, if you've been in radio, stand-up comedy, music, it definitely tests your mettle and it tests your, not in an esoteric way of Christianity, but if you believe in an idea of like some sort of armor of God, something that protects you from low vibrational demonic thing, when you're dealing with these industries that are fame and cloudy, there's a lot of demons that you're like, holy shit, where you really get, everyone's like, I don't have a dollar sign that could be put in front of me for blank. I would never sell out. It's interesting when you have those really put in front of you and what you decide to do with it. And so, I think Hollywood, New York, Chicago, and just these certain kind of industries, you get a big feel of like what kind of whore you really are. And it's just a muscle everybody has to learn of like what kind of whore you are, like what kind of money you're going to take for what your authentic self really means to you, you don't know why, but your gut just tells you no. And if you really abide by it, or if you are a slave to the beast. So I don't know. It's just really easy. Sometimes it's easy to talk in Christian esoteric stuff because I feel like most of us grew up that way. So it's like a language we all share. But some of the, like, I don't really know who or what or God or source or any of these things, but some things I just know. Like there is a dark energy and a light energy, and some of us are attached to this dark energy, and some of us are attached to the light energy, and the dark energy wants us all the time, like a battery. And I think this like light energy wants to set us free or something, but we are real free. No one can teach you how to be your real free. Like that's your authentic you. But I don't know. It's a whole head trip. You asked me about like West Coast or something to get here, but yeah, Los Angeles fame, blah.
Did you end up going to the West Coast? So would you say that you had kind of liberal views when you went there? Did they become more liberal or less liberal? Because the reason I'm asking is because I'm curious if I was surrounded by those people. If because the thing is, I'm very much like you. There's a lot of liberal things I agree with. I mean, I, I mean, I'm not a libertarian. I'm not a liberal. I'm not a conservative. I'm not of anything because I don't.
Each idea, it
Yeah,
like each idea is a, I, or Los Angeles didn't make me anything. It just, no one in, this is like a kind of crazy thing for me that I don't know if people in California could admit this to themselves, but you don't give a you don't give a shit about anything other than your own state. You think and if you're in Hollywood or San Francisco or San Diego, you think you're even better than California. So you're in a city that thinks you're better than a state, the state that thinks you're better than the rest of the country, and you look down at everyone and all of a sudden anyone who disagrees with you, you're like, well, they're on a tractor and they're racist. And that's really the mindset you get out there. You're better than everyone. You're kind of mean when you live in Los Angeles. It's like even your friends you mock. It's like this edge of mean. Um, and then Portland, I think I got to heal a lot of myself because it was a sweet, sweet place, the Pacific Northwest. Uh, but it's dangerously liberal. That's actually where the rubber band, like, because the shallowness, you think you leave it from Los Angeles, but I got to witness from far back where there's like a hot topic. I got to witness a clique of lesbians that all girls are this way, and they might find it hard to admit to themselves, but they're very easily led by peer pressure. They are from the time they're 10 years old, 12 years old. It doesn't matter. If one of them starts cutting, the group of them will start cutting. If one of them starts with an eating disorder, they all will. If one of them starts playing softball, all of a sudden they're all lesbians. Like it's like this thing that happens. So I think I witnessed groups of liberals, women, where it's like one of them became transgender and then the clique of them became transgender. And it wasn't really it's almost like pushing the edge, pushing the edge. You want to be so different, but now if I want to be so different and I show up at a town, I could walk around my town and everyone's like, whoa, look at that crazy tattooed person. But I go to Portland and I walk around and I literally look like every other woman there. And if I feel like I still need to push this needle because I need somebody to notice me or I'm going to push that needle. And I think that's kind of what Oregon feels like to me. They sit on a different pedestal and they're like, the rest of the country is racist and they have no black people there. It's like the rest of the country, it's all a bunch of transients. They have no investment in the state at all. They don't give a shit about their own families. Most of them don't care about where they came from. And then they all vote and control the whole entire thing just from Portland. So it doesn't matter if you're a farmer out in Oregon. It doesn't matter if you live out in the desert or in some smaller town. They can control the whole entire state with a bunch of transients. And most of the transients don't give a shit. They move there because they're like, what? I don't even need an address and I can get $200 of food stamps in a day. Perfect. I can get $800 unemployment and I never even made that much in my life. Ideal. And that's how you can easily take apart a town from the inside out. It really, the Portland is the example of what the Unabomber and what Malcolm X wrote about. Portland is that example written down where you think you're on your pedestal because poor them. It gives you tons of sympathy, no empathy.
that's a great way of putting it. Yeah, I mean, some of the people that I know that are super Black Lives Matter, super, anti-police, defund the police type of people who subscribe to those philosophies and ideas. don't have any black friends. They don't,
None.
like I mean, I grew up playing basketball. So like usually basketball is one of those sports that it's really
Mhm.
popular in inner cities. So we would go
I
play.
eat fried chicken, so I have black friends. No, you're like, I played basketball and break dance. No, me too, though. I played basketball in school, and that's where I met all my black girlfriends. Like, they didn't play softball, they played basketball.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a part of their culture. I mean, and so yeah, I have a lot of black friends, and it's funny how like when you have that comfort with them, like we can talk about these race issues in kind of a open, honest way, and we can talk about them and get people's real opinions on it. And most of the people who are pushing for these things, like they've never even sat down and had a conversation with somebody that they're supposedly defending or talk to them about these issues. So it's like you're assuming this is where they stand on all these issues and you're defending that, but yet you've never actually dissected those ideas with them to know where they stand. And one or two or 10 or 20 people who might have the same ideas shouldn't represent the whole community. And just like if I'm Portuguese, like my ideas that I share on this show doesn't represent all Portuguese people. Like that's just, so it
Are
just
we allowed to be more mad than the victim?
that's a really good point. That's a
That's what I feel like that's what our society has become. We're just a whole society more infuriated than the victim. And because all of us don't do anything, like we don't create a thing, most of us, outrage is our new sport.
well, everybody has a voice. And I think, like you said, a lot of it's just like brownie points. It's like you might not even be a really good person, but you want everybody to believe you are. Or maybe you don't believe it and you're trying to convince yourself by going out and doing these things like going to these protests. These aren't issues.
Dumping ALS water on your head.
Yeah. I mean, it just, it might be one of those things where it's just like, I don't know if I'm a good person, but I want to believe I am. And I think if I do these things or if I subscribe to these ideas, they seem like good ideas. But that, it's like that saying, if you're not a liberal when you're young, you don't have a heart. If you're not a conservative when you're old, you don't have a brain. And the reason why a lot of artists I think are liberals is because we kind of look at life from a emotional perspective. Like we're emotional creatures. We connect with people. We care about other people's pain and suffering. And we've been brainwashed into believing that the liberals are the ones who also care about those things, because their focus, at least in our lifetime, like their focus was always like child support and welfare and food stamps and inner city education and all these type of things. I'm like, oh, they want to take care of like the less fortunate, they want to take care of the minorities, they want to take care of people who are struggling. And conservatives always seem like rich CEOs who have everything and they're assholes because typically if you're head of a corporation, your morals are kind of like left at home when you go to work and you only care about making the maximum profit. And when you're young and you probably don't have money, but even if you do, like that's not really a important thing it's not an important part of your life. You relate to the other side much better. And it's really a trick. I mean, we really have been tricked into believing they actually care, when I don't think it's really about caring. I think it's about controlling and making people dependent on the system. I mean, I just had Ryan from The Last American Vagabond on, like I think I told you. And we talked about this because he's an anarchist, which he's not, I forget how he says, like how he said it. He's like, it's not that I believe in
Peaceful anarchy. That's my favorite of the words, where I'm like, yeah, me too. No laws if everyone's peaceful. I'm with you. But that seems like a crazy, I don't know if it's him specifically. I just put that all on him. That just
yeah,
was the
but it's similar to what he says. He says it's not that he doesn't believe in any rules, but he just believes in no rulers. But I'm like, okay, who the fuck makes the rules then? And who enforces them? And who, like, it's almost like like you said, the, the same way you should look at like every adult who's a little fucked up as like a child who wasn't nurtured and wasn't taken care of. Like look at every society as like a village, right? And like you said, like it's just a bigger village. Like if we were living in a small community on an island, like how would we handle each other? How do we take care of each other? Would we?
The beach. I
Yeah.
always tell people, just think of that movie, The Beach. It's paradise until somebody gets so sick that they scream every night and take away slowly from everyone's communal space. How long do they let him scream every night before there's no rule for it. So they just walk him out into the middle of the jungle and leave him there. They didn't kill him, but there's no rule for that. And everywhere is paradise. And for me personally, I just am very always hard pressed to find a mother or a father who's an anarchist. I think it's interesting how quickly that goes out the window when you know it takes a village to raise a kid appropriately. And if there aren't those rules to go by, then it just gets a little more nervous out there.
Well, and my argument's always a community's only as strong as its weakest link. It's if I have people who are struggling to survive that live near me, I can't if I have enough money, I guess I could neglect them to a extent. I could put a huge fence up, I could hire private security, but that's not the case for the majority of people. So that means that if people are hungry, if people don't have the necessities, it's just a matter of time before they break into my house, break into my car. They end up robbing my kids or attacking me or my wife.
Or raping your woman. That's the other thing. A lot of the people I hear talk about anarchy, the idea of rape isn't in their head once a day. Like, I just want to go for a run. Shit, is the sun already setting? I probably can't do that. I just want to park my car at the grocery store. Well, you know what? Let me drive around one more time because I can't park this far away. It's not in a lit spot. Like, these are everyday things that men don't have to think about, that women have to think about every second of their day. Just that idea of being like, I'm a tough bitch. If you take me on, it is going to hurt you. But hands down, if you want to rape me, you can rape me. I'm not naive to that. Maybe it's from knowing fighters and really knowing what the toughest women in the world really have up against just the average man. So it's just like an easy fucking thing to say, anarchy, when you've walked through a really safe existence with cops there when you need them and with a dad or whatever. I don't know. It just seems like it's just a naive.
But isn't the counter argument that people don't not do things because there's cops? Like, in other words, like a criminal is still going to commit the crime, and if he wants to, and he never thinks to himself like, hey, this is wrong, like let me stop. It's like that's already out the window. So it's almost like we're looking at things from like, okay, this is what's going on, but like what's causing it? What's this, we're looking at the symptom, but we're not looking at the root cause of the issue. Like, why does somebody want to rape somebody? Why does like and that's like the anarchist libertarian perspective, and it's kind of true. Like this idea that I kind of subscribe to, this idea that like I don't think people drugs are a perfect example, right? Here's a kind of current day example. People would say if you make all drugs legal, people are going to do drugs left and right. And similar to rape,
I'm not going to do heroin,
but
you're not. You know what yeah, I totally agree.
But you get like it's kind of similar to
They
rape.
say the drunk driving laws never changed anything.
No, exactly. And it's like, okay, I don't not do cocaine or heroin because it's legal or illegal. I don't do it because it's just not something I want to do. I don't not rape people because I'm going to go to prison for it. I don't do it because it's wrong. And you don't, obviously I don't have to describe all the reasons why I rape somebody, but so do you get what I mean? So like, do you think that, from the perspective of an anarchist, that's what they would say. They would say, like, people aren't doing.
And I would say, yeah, I agree with that. But now, if I'm in my bed sleeping and that same bad person wants to come and rape me, regardless of cops, I, as the good person, still have a cop to call. So it really isn't about the bad person and what they're going to do and not do. The idea of where the cops are now are not where they're supposed to be. And then the cops for a sheriff thing is kind of a different argument. And then how like they're trying to really just privatize police eventually. So Amazon could probably own that too. Like to really push all that so far away with where we're at and the monster that it's become doesn't take away to me the idea of you walking into a town where maybe my husband just died and I have 3 daughters and there's like an old man and you have a horse and you seem strong and you seem like a good guy and I could throw a star at you and you might be a sheriff in this town. And now I can sleep tonight because you're going to ride your horse by my house. But it's not because the bad people aren't going to do it still. It's maybe just so I can sleep tonight and raise my kids and not have to think about it. And maybe that's complacency, but I do believe there has to be some idea of the sheriffs that want to be the sheriffs just walking around without even the star sometimes, so that others of us or other people can just have the purity to raise good kids and, you know, teach school. I don't know what kind of do ballet. I don't know what kind of pure thing, ice skate that I would think of, but that's why laws exist. And that's why, you know, it's crazy that they have to, but I don't know what came first, the bad person or somebody that was willing to stand up and say, hey, 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 this is not allowed to happen. So as long as there is the bad people, I'm glad there's the people and the rules and all of us agreeing upon that, hey, it's not okay to do this, right? And we're all like, yeah, it's not okay to do this. And then there's consequences for doing that. I'm okay with that too. So I don't know. I don't agree with anarchy. I don't know what that means because even anarchy would eventually have laws. Or we all are just, I don't know, it's Russian roulette in the streets. Maybe it's a different kind of old West town, like the quick and the dead. We're at noon every day. If you're disagreeing with someone, we could just go shoot each other. Or maybe it's the purge. Like the idea when people say peaceful anarchy, I just automatically think that's the purge in a week.
Well, they've done experiments like in certain small towns where they would remove all the street signs and lights at the intersection to see how people would react, and it was actually less car accidents because people were so concerned about actually getting in a car accident at the intersection that they would slow down and, you know, let people.
You go.
Yeah,
You.
exactly. So, you know, this idea, you know, because that is one of those things where.
But they took away the game board when everybody already knew the rules. So it's already a flawed experiment. Everybody already knows these rules. It wasn't like they gave everybody a pogo ball inside of a room and just said, okay, the goal is trying to get this blue beanbag and that red hoop. Like that's a whole different game. What happens? But the rule of driving, and as Americans, if you're a certain age or above, we all know the rules of that game. So it doesn't matter what hoops they take out or lights they add in. We already know the rule.
Remember
so I would say it's kind of, but that's just my contrarian with that experiment.
I mean, it's almost like when they did the mouse experiment to see if I don't know if it was cocaine or heroin. If one of them was addictive, and they put it in the water. I'm sure you've heard of this experiment, and they kept coming to the water until it died, and then, you know, they're like, look, this substance is addictive. We've kind of proven it. And then Canadian scientists are like, well, one thing we're not taking consideration is the cage. Like the cage has become a part of the experiment. So they created something called Rat Park with, you know, all these places for it to play and mate and do all these things. And they did the same experiment, and the mouse didn't come to the water and went off and played. And they realized, like, okay, the cage was affecting
The
the
alpha
yeah.
experiment. The alpha. You hear this all the time. We hear this all the time. Everyone say alpha male, alpha male, alpha male. I'm the alpha male. We need more alpha males. That's what this society needs. The whole study of alpha was done inside of captivity, and they withheld food. So if you withhold food from a species and then drop food in, 100% of the time, the strongest one will step to the top. But if you take those same wolves and put them in society, alpha is a frequency. And sometimes the women will step up to protect the one male who is always the one who makes sure the whole pack is fed. Sometimes the strongest man will jump up because the woman's nursing. So alpha becomes a frequency. So the one thing that we all run on is this idea of alpha male when really it was in captivity that it was done. So it was a flawed study from the beginning. But that is pretty much, I mean, all back to the, vaccine of it all. The church, I can admit to worshiping at the Church of Hollywood, but very few can admit to worshiping at the Church of Science. And it is all of science is based on a flawed study that no one will get to the bottom to just be like, well, wait. The alpha male is flawed. So why do we keep running we're all basing all this shit on a study that's not even real.
And that's why it is important to question dinosaurs like hey Bravo and do all those things. I remember I had a Dr. Jessica Rose on my show, and she's awesome, super interesting person. She's a professional surfer, she's a virologist, she's a biologist, she's a mathematician, she's a musician. She's like such a all around interesting person. We're talking about when she went to college and she went through the university, like some of the like bibles of her profession, like the bibles of virology, and like I forgot who the author was or what the book was, and she's like, these is kind of like the basis of our theories on on viruses. And I'm like, yeah, but how do you know all that stuff is right? Like, how do you know, I'm like, you're basically everything is based, it starts off with like these people who basically spawned this philosophy on seeing viruses and seeing the world, and we're just assuming that they're correct. And it almost it's weird because it's like that's something we don't do, right? It's like you get somebody on who studies viruses or biology or whatever, like who came up with biology and what was that information based on, like, and were those theories actually flawed experiments and studies, like you're saying, like were there holes that can be found in those in that research, or do we just accept that we basically do, we accept it and we say no, this is what we teach in biology, this is what we teach in regards to viruses and how they work. And so it's really interesting because I think a lot of times we're adopting things that we're not even sure are true or real.
Here's a new one. This is just, I know it's like will trigger a lot of conspiracy theorists, but it is all the bone wars, dinosaurs of it all. Everybody, they set up the two poles for us, so it's boom, Edison, boom, Tesla. So the cool kids like Tesla, the uncool kids that aren't researched, they're not woke yet, they like Edison. So everyone always talks about this electricity, the Wardenclyffe Tower. No one talks about the copper and the wires and like how that is by far way more everywhere. And then if you want to talk about the quote unquote money, which I don't even believe is a real thing for the people that run the world, it's just this bullshit currency we run on. So there must have been a reason to want to get this copper wire wrapped all the way around us. And then if you really think about it, what do you effing need electricity for? Is Tesla really the good guy? What do you need the electricity for? Light? What about if I told you before all that light was around you, you could see just fine in the dark as a human? The only place you needed a light was if you were going to a cave, and even that you would have a torch for it or something. Like the things that we have electricity for now, these computers, the microwave, the TV, they're all just ways of their enslavement on us. They haven't made our life better, more peaceful. Has it made it easier? Maybe. But has that ease, has that added to your anxiety? I would say so. So it's like there's it's like buying a guitar, your first guitar, and working your ass off for it, or getting it handed to you. The first guitar you work your ass off, you keep that guitar forever. Like a guitar just given to you that you might not even play that guitar. And I kind of feel like that about the ease of our life a little bit with this electricity, while we're arguing all the time of who's better, Tesla or Edison, who's better, what about the Wardenclyffe Towers, free energy? What do you need that for? What about if we just talk about what is this power, quote unquote power, quote unquote currency, quote unquote energy, all these words, this Larry Gators of it again. What about if I said you don't even need electricity? That's all the ways they enslave you. And everyone's like, oh, easy for you to say. It is easy for me to say as a Floridian because I live without electricity when a big hurricane comes through on a regular. Most Floridians do. We do it at least once a year. For the longest time I've ever did it in a house, a regular normal house is at least 2 weeks, but I know Floridians that have done it for 6. So it's just like, yeah, I'm telling you, very quickly you can go without electricity and power. So I think Tesla's bullshit too. I think he has other stuff. If you want to get into time travel, if you want to get into death ray, if you want to get into some next level, but while you guys are stuck at the bottleneck of power, quote unquote power still, I'm going to move on and just say he's bullshit too, because it's written about and you learned about it and you know about it, and everything that I need to find out about and everything that I'm finding is the secrets. It's not easy to find those ones. No one's touting them off from the rooftops. No one's worshiping at the church of Tesla if he's still a good guy. I don't know.
No, it's interesting. I mean, the thing about being able to see in the dark, I mean, it kind of makes sense because a lot of times technology or what we think is a innovation to make our lives easier does have some negative effects. And there's a book called, I think it's called Learn to Run, but it's about like how Nike basically fucked us up because what they did is they start putting all this cushioning on the heels of the shoes, and we're not designed to run on our heels. We're supposed to run on the ball of our feet. And you see with little kids, like they're constantly like, even little babies, when they're learning to walk, what do? They all stand on their toes, on the ball of their feet. They don't put their heels down. And because if you and I were running, we're like, hey, let me race you to this spot. We're not going to run or let's do it barefoot. Let's race barefoot. We're not going to run a heel first because it would hurt if we had to step on a rock or whatever, or we're running on blacktop or concrete. So Nike puts this cushioning, and next thing you know, we start walking and running incorrectly, which causes all these other issues like joint pain and our body's just not designed to run that way, so it can cause other issues. So it's similar, like you said, with like the light. Like light might have been something that seemed convenient and like a good idea, but maybe because of the light, it kind of, we lost our ability to really see in the dark. And I mean, as you know, like, and as everybody knows, like when you first turn off the lights, it takes you a while for your eyes to adapt. And initially you can't see anything. And little by little, you start noticing things, and your eyes are getting used to not having light. So years and years and generations of constantly exercising your eyesight for the dark, maybe we lost our ability to kind of see in the dark. Maybe we have, it kind of does make
illuminated ones, Illuminati, isn't that because they brought the light? That's what I think. I'm like, let's go all the way back to it. Let's go to the root words. I have this awesome friend named Bella, and she told me this fact that pirates wore eye patches because below deck was pitch black and above deck it was sunny. So they would just switch it. So they would always have one eye that was prepared for the sunniest or the darkest. And that fact just blew my mind, that your brain, because it's left and right and it talks to each opposite eye, that you would be capable of teaching your eyeballs, one how to see in the dark and one how to see. If you've ever been on an open ocean on the brightest day, it's almost blinding in a different way. So yeah, I just thought that was like such a crazy cool fact of our eyeballs are, just a miracle unto themselves, just our eyeball. Well, and then look at the eye of Ra, like look at that all-seeing eye, the Saturn symbol, like just those two things with the Illuminati and our eyeballs, like the illusion of seeing, like the illusion of what we think we see, the movies, the TV, the MK Ultra of it all. It's like the difference between real magic and illusion.
For what is real magic what do you consider real magic?
Um, I like there's this you know that movie Signs?
Yeah, yeah.
And there's a speech Mel Gibson gives Meryl because Meryl's like, "Can you just be normal for 1 second and comfort me like you used to?" And he's like, kind of like there's two kinds of people in the world. There's people that believe in luck and there's people that believe in miracles. And the people that believe in luck, things just happen. And sometimes they're good things and sometimes they're bad things, but they're all in it. It's for them. But the people that believe in miracles believe there's no such thing as coincidence. And regardless of what happens, they're not going to be alone. And they're once I feel like that you're not alone and that you attach to a source and all the energy around you, every number you see like a simulation, but you're in control of it. And every animal you see, every song you listen to, every person you meet, and everything that goes into your head becomes like some glass of water that you lay around your house that you don't drink because of a particle, that you don't drink it because somebody else touched it. And it becomes this like collective thing you put all over your life. And then one day when shit hits the fan and an alien's in your living room, you see it and you fucking grab the bat and swing away. And you knew it all. Your whole life was set up for that. And that's magic. And sometimes it's really small and it's just a butterfly that you're like, holy shit, look at that pretty butterfly. And right as I said that, I have this thing with the simulation. Like I know a lot of people do magic numbers or angel numbers. I see V's of birds. It's like my thing I see because it's just magnificent. It's ridiculous. And if you haven't seen it, you think it's fake. And right as I said it and looked up, like a V of birds like flew across like the window that I'm looking in front of, because that's just like we're all attached. And that awkward feeling of like, I should not call this person and say this. I should not tell that person this. I should not ask this question or go in that room. That awkward feeling is the feeling of, I think it feels awkward because we've been conditioned away from our natural magical selves of attaching to that energy. But if you own that awkward feeling, I think you find like 100% of the time when you pick up the phone when you were thinking about them, or you got that message in your head that you felt was loud as day for them and you say it, you will be so validated by the energy that comes back. You will be so instantly validated where I can't believe I said it. You feel it come up out of your throat. And sometimes it's just something like, I love you. It's like, I can't believe I said that. Like the validation that comes back is pretty spectacular. And that's magic.
I'm gonna have to digest that for a while. That's yeah, no, that it's interesting. I mean, there is a lot of interesting things that happen in our life that you could consider magic or magical and can't be explained. And yeah, you ever listen to Fringe FM?
No.
So Fringe FM, the guy who created it, the Ripple Effect podcast is live every Wednesday night, I think from 6 to 9 or something like that, or 6 to 8. But it's like a radio app, but it's all like alternative media, fringe stuff. Charlie Robinson's on there, Crime America,
Okay.
myself, and but the guy who created it, Joe, he also has a show, and you would be perfect for a show because these are exactly the things he talks about. He was a guest on the Union of he was a guest on my show before, but we also invite him on the Union of the Unwanted, I believe, when we did the cult episode. And he super fascinating. And a big part of that discussion was about magic and what is magic and if it's good or if it's bad, and if there is good or bad magic and all these things. And I know magic, a lot of times people look at it as, like, oh, you mean a card trick? What are you talking about?
That's an illusion. It's like a TV show. Like if I can convince you that World War III is coming for 20 years, can you use your magic to manifest it? That's what I think they're doing. I think the illusionists are using their illusions to use our magic against us. We're the manifestors. We're the architects of the simulation. They have no power here. We are attached to earth. We are divine. They have nothing. They've decided. And I do think somewhere you can decide, or I could decide, that we wouldn't want to be attached to source anymore. And I'm sure there's a great power that comes with that in flesh. I think probably a great fame. I do think there's rituals that you can do. I think there's intention. Like, you could make a soup for your family, or you can make a soup with love as an ingredient for your family. You can make just a soup for your family, or you can make a legitimate soup that you're like, this is going to be healing. Bay leaf. Anyone out there who's ever cooked the soup, probably, or your grandma, she has a bay leaf in it. That's magic. There's like good luck that people, your mom cooking beans on the first of the year, there's reason behind that. There's intention in things. So somebody is using your intention if you're not. Like, if you get yourself intoxicated and you're just blackout drunk and you're driving around, like, somebody's using that energy. Something is using it. Something's getting off on it. Something's feeding on it. And if it's really good, it gets to drive you for a long time. And if it's really, really good, I think it gets to drive you until you kill yourself. And then it jumps. I don't know all of the ins and outs of everything, but some of the things I just know. Like, I can't find them in a book yet. I look everywhere. Like, I can't find the Secret Society of Women yet. I can't find, I can find some truths on witches, but not a ton. I can find that, the old tale, but even in my lifetime, how many different stories we've heard of the Salem witch trials is bullshit. I love Merlin. I love the Sword and the Stone. I love King Arthur. I think all that shit's magic. Like the god kings of like Persia and everything like that, that stuff's magic. Whatever the Egyptians had going on, or the Mayans, magic. So that's all the great secrets that I think are hidden from us. That's what I think the rituals that Manly P. Hall was into. Some of the secrets that I think the Masons try to keep alive. And that's why we all probably think they're so evil. Because I'm just under the impression, if the Hollywood and the news and the politicians all tell us something's bad, that's probably the stuff we should be looking into.
Yeah, the Masons, that's a interesting take on it. I mean, I kind of have wrestled with that theory too, that they just have some wisdom, some knowledge that they're that's
written in stone.
Yeah, that they consider sacred, that they're keeping within their group. Yeah, I mean, the placebo effect is magic. We don't know how it works.
Yes.
It's you think it's doing something. It's no different than, like you said, if you're convinced that your mother's soup is going to heal you, it's going to heal you to some extent. It's going to make you feel better to some extent. That's magic. I mean, that's not something that you can quantify. That's not something you can explain. It's not something that will have the same reaction with every person in every situation. It's something specific to that situation because you believed, and believing made it real. And so yeah, it's all super interesting for people listening who want more of this deep conversation and interesting takes. Where can people find Project Chaney? If you don't post videos, do you? Are you on any video platforms?
Not yet. I was thinking maybe I might do something very soon. It's just a weird, like, I kind of want Project Chaney to stay this audio. It gives me, like, and my guest, like, privacy for the magic to happen. And then I share it. I do want to do something else. I'm kind of craving maybe doing something live, a little something with an audience. But if anyone wants to find me, they can go to Project Chaney, anywhere they get their podcast, anywhere. If they put CHANEY, probably everywhere I've been comes up. And yeah, projectchaney.com. They can find me at Chaney in Wonderland, like the second most shadow banned person on Instagram, or Project Chaney on Instagram.
And you're not on Twitter or Float?
Oh, Twitter. I usually just post fight stuff, but that's at Weak Neck Baby.
Yeah,
that was my Tony Ferguson, like I said, I don't want to hold your baby if your baby can't hold up its own head. And like the champ shit only, like when people are like, you want to hold my baby? Can your baby hold its own head up? then no, I don't want to hold it yet. I don't want to hold a baby and a head. That's too much work.
Tony, Tony was one of my favorite. Well, he still is, but he is an interesting character. It's weird. I don't like him outside of the octagon. In the octagon, I think his weirdness and uniqueness benefits his style, because that's why he does so many just crazy things that are unpredictable. But I'm like, every once in a while I'm like, I like him, and then other times I'm like, Tony, why'd you say that? Like
Like
what?
a year later, he makes me laugh. Like when I watched that one time, him and Khabib, and then Dana was between him, and he jumped right at the last minute and it startled Dana. I like when it happened, I'm like, Tony's such a weirdo. But now I can watch it and it cracks me up. Or like when he had those balls at one weigh-in where he just had the ball. Like he is a weird, weird dude. But I also follow him live on Instagram where I'm an insomniac. So sometimes it'll be 3:30 in the morning and Tony will be on a 10-mile run for no fucking reason because he can't sleep either. And I'm like, and he's just running. He's not doing anything. He's not talking. He's just running. And he's so fast.
That's one more reason to go on Fringe FM, because Light the Void, which is Joe, the creator of Fringe FM's show, I think it's on at midnight. And he's asked me, I remember when Ripple Effect podcast first went on Fringe FM, he's like, I got to get you on my show. I'm like, when is it? Weekdays at midnight? I'm like, dude, I'll never make it. I'm like, I sound like a retard, just about any time of the day. Never mind if I'm not tired. So it would be perfect for you, because if you're up,
I'm totally down.
it's probably not not an easy show to book guests for, I would say, unless I guess if you do have international guests, then it could be early in the morning for them. But yeah, but very fascinating. He's a very fascinating dude. You would definitely riff with him, I think. But yeah, we're gonna have to talk fights eventually, because that's a topic that I don't really get a chance to talk.
We should do a fight companion.
Yeah, it's funny when you brought that up. I was going to mention I was doing, and this is before 2020, and kind of stopped me doing it. But I was doing a show. So my version of a fight companion was Fight with Friends, or Fights with Friends. So I was watching the fights with friends, and what I would do is like, okay, Joe Rogan does fight companions for all the for a bunch of events, but never the pay-per-views, because he's usually working them. So I'm like, so I'm going to do Fights with Friends for the pay-per-views. So people, if they want, they can get a kind of like a fight companion type show when Joe Rogan's not doing them. So that's what we did for a while. I'd get a bunch of friends together. I have a table back here, and we would watch this TV behind me, and just get hammered. And just, I mean, I remember I think the first one we did, the last like 3 hours were just horrendous dick jokes, and we were just so drunk and such in a giggly mood, when you're with your friends, and like,
that's my favorite.
I love it. It's like, you want to talk about like the zone, how do we get in the zone as an athlete? Like, that's a similar type of thing where you get in this zone of everything's hilarious, and you're giggling and you can't stop laughing. And I remember like my cheeks hurt. I laughed so hard. And all my friends were just like, nobody's going to want to listen to this. I'm like, you'll be surprised. And people were downloading it weeks later, months later. And I would send my friends like the download numbers. I'm like, look, people actually want to hear us just be ourselves and be silly and whatever. And these guys are like, I can't believe I said that. I'm like, I'm like, don't worry about it. I'm like, we're just being silly, like nobody takes it too seriously. But those were some of my most fun shows I've ever done, just because there was no script. You're just kind of riffing off one another. You're being honest. You're being silly, and if you get the right group of friends, like it's perfect, because we have those friends that like bring out the silliness. We have those friends that bring out maybe the deeper conversations. We have those friends, so it's like certain people will bring out certain sides of you. And so if you get the right group of people, it can really be a blast. So, but I was thinking, I'm like, it's hard to get those guys together again and kind of start up again. I'm like, I've actually pondered on the idea. I'm like, would I be able to capture that type of fun conversation fight companion type of show if we're doing it via Zoom with like a couple guests that are all fight fans, and we all get together and we're kind of hanging out and watching the fights together. So I'd be curious. That's something that maybe we should put together someday, because I know.
I'd totally be into it. I
Yeah.
think it'd be fun because it's like when the fights are good enough, they're good enough and no one can turn away. But sometimes they're not. And when you're in the room with the right people, and the craziest thing, MMA fans over any of my other friends are predominantly open-minded conspiracy theorists. So it's like that sport specifically always ends up in the craziest. It's weird that that primal, whatever that is, that it brings out. Like once you see the chess in fighting, it does something to your brain. It must make both sides of your brain work. It like dancing, fighting must have that exact same thing.
Or do you
Where
think because it was a fringe sport for such a while, like they're like, okay, like we can't just take public opinion too seriously because nobody took our sport seriously, and now it's a big deal and it's respected. And even though everybody else was saying it was human cockfighting or whatever, so fuck the media and fuck, what the mainstream says. I wonder if that has something to do with it too, because it's like you're.
or the fight styles being already like, because they're based in discipline, because they're based in like all these old techniques and cultures. Usually a lot of the people, even if I would say the youngest of all of them would probably be like American wrestling of all the fight styles. So if you take even an American wrestler and how much more discipline that kid has over every other kid. Gordo said something that the class clowns were the first people that got the system was broken. Like they were already the people that were like, well, this is bullshit. I can learn the same stuff without having to listen to this guy yammer on and I'll still pass, like they already got something was off. I feel like there's something about fighters too, especially trained fighters. They already get something's off because it's one of the things I guess we're told that like no fighting, no fighting. But then to get to a place where it's like an art.
Which is weird because that's literally how we resolve all of the world issues by fighting, which makes, yeah, it's like, oh, don't fight. Like, that's not how you resolve things. Unless it's a country against a country, then we bomb the shit out of each other. Yeah.
That's part of the pussification. We used to be this country that it's like, if my kid was a jerk to your kid, and like I would come over or you would come over and bring your kid, and sometimes parents would be like, and these kids are going to fight it out. And that would be that. And they'd be there to make sure no one got really hurt. And most of the time, people would be friends after the fight. Like there is some kind of scaredness of us making physical contact that we do have nowadays. There's like,
I also think there's energy and adrenaline pumping. And if you can get that out, you realize like, okay, maybe I'm not that angry. Maybe I'm like, maybe this really wasn't worth the fight. So there was this, so I didn't do very good in school, and I had to be in some classes that were specifically for kids who were getting in trouble. And but the teacher that we had, I remember it was my freshman year in high school, and I had this teacher that he basically had me and another handful of kids all day. He taught us all the classes were all with him. He taught us all the subjects, and he was there to basically make sure we behaved and didn't get in trouble. And he was suitable to do this job because he came from a really extreme alternative school where it was like just full of kids who got kicked out of public school. And so when he met us, he's like, you guys are fucking angels compared to he's like, I don't know why people think you guys are bad kids. He's like, you guys are angels. And but I remember him telling me the story of how they would handle conflicts between two kids. And what you just said reminds me of this, and it worked. What they would do if two guys wanted to fight, or two girls or whoever wanted to fight, they would put these giant, ridiculously large boxing gloves on them, right, on the kids, and they would actually go to this fake ring, and everybody would watch, and they would fight each other. And he's like, these gloves were so big and puffy that you would get so tired trying to hurt somebody with these big puffy gloves on that like nobody would ever get hurt. And but very little a bit of time into the fight, they'd be so exhausted, they're just like, okay, we're done. And he's like, I'm exhausted, and and so I wonder if it works because you do get that energy out, that aggression out. It's
alchemy. you said it earlier. You said me and my buddies, when we were laughing, is one of the key ingredients that misses so much in alchemy. Like we have this energy in us sometimes. It's going to come out somehow. We're going to fight it out. We're going to laugh it out. We're going to cry it out. We're going to fuck it out. We're going to do one of these things to get rid of it. You have to decide. You have to put intention behind you're going to get that out. You're going to get that out. How are you going to get that out? And that's, if you're a person that's not picking one of those ways to get it out or all those ways to get it out, you're miserable. You have anxiety, you're sad, you're like chewing yourself up from the inside out. It's like part of the alchemy. You have to get it out. And so, yeah, I think sometimes when you think you're going to get it out, that's why like sex, dancing, fighting. Sometimes when somebody's getting it out on you too, that is a whole different energy exchange.
Well, that's like makeup sex, right? I mean, you get
Yeah, two at once. You get them both.
you have all this built up aggression and anger, and then it's like you get it out and you feel better. And it really is all, like you said, it's all very similar in regards to like this built up energy that needs to be released.
And you have a glow afterward, like when you get home from the gym, or if you just laughed your face off until you cried and you're a little snotty and you're like, whew, oh my gosh. Or if you all look freshly fucked, you're like, oh my gosh, you look amazing. You have a glow about you.
That sounds like a production team that does porn for
That's the name of our fight companion.
Freshly Fucked Productions. That would definitely get some clicks. I'll tell you, a lot of disappointed people. They're like, wait, they're all wearing clothes and they're talking about MMA.
We're glowing though. That's the point.
So funny. But thank you so much, Chaney, for being with me. I'll definitely keep you in touch for future Union of the Unwanted shows because I love having you on those. And
I loved hanging out with you today. It was really fun.
Yeah, these are a blast. I mean, it's so fun to kind of just pick at people's brains and kind of get people's perspectives and like you say it and I also say it too on my show about how it's a journey. Like I'm learning from every conversation, I'm growing from every conversation. It's not just the listener who feels like they're on a journey and we're just whatever. Like we're all on this journey together and we're all growing together and learning together, and that's what makes it so much fun because it's like that's some of sometimes it's nice to do a information filled show where you're like, hey, I'm giving like all this information. It's information dense conversation where you're really getting all this hard hitting information. But sometimes it's nice just to like see the human side of people. I because that aspect of it is so important. Just we're all humans. We all have struggles. You'll see somebody like, I'll get a Dr. Peter McCullough on, right? And he gave me like an hour of info, statistics, science, then all this stuff. And it's like, it was awesome. I had all this amazing feedback, but I would love to get a guest on like him on again. And then like, who is he? Like what's his wants, desires? What's his upbringing? Like, who is he as a human? Because so much of like who we are really is the foundation that makes us want to pursue something like Peter McCullough. Like he's going out and he's talking about treatments, and he's willing to fight back against mainstream medicine and mainstream doctors. So it's like it's really important to get that information out there, but it's also really intriguing to know why he's willing to do it and why he's willing to speak out and what's his journey, what's his origin story that led him to become this person that's willing to go against the grain. And so yeah, I mean, I guess it's all basically what we discussed today, just like everybody's story and extracting wisdom and knowledge and life experiences from people. That's what you get from long form conversation. I mean, that's why I love podcasts. I love listening to them. I love recording them. I love having them. I don't get people who do podcasts and are like, oh, I don't really listen to podcasts. I'm like, really? I'm like, no. I'm like, that's like a musician who doesn't listen to music. Like, it's just, to me, it's like, it's kind of weird. It's like you're doing it because you assume you understand the beauty or the importance in it, where you get something out of it.
I'm so inspired by it. Like I'm inspired by everyone's shows. Like there's new shows I've come across in just the last year and a half, 2 years of my life. And they just changed everything I thought I knew about something, or just like an honesty that I know I want. And yeah, like it's it's like we're all building ourselves. That's what we're all doing. And that is why I called my show a project, like Project Chaney. I'm building myself. But in doing that, we're all healing each other by finding words to our lives. And so we're projecting. So project and project are spelled the exact same way. And so, yeah, that's what this is all about. Like, we're just projections of each other. We're like mirrors. And so, all those like shitty things you see on your worst enemies, you got those traits, or you're overcoming those traits, or you're bitter about those traits. But all the awesome things you see, you're all that shit too. And I don't know. So I'm so grateful of like these kind of shows. I feel like we're having like public church.
That's a good way of putting it. It kind of is, yeah. It does, and in a way, sometimes it does feel spiritual, or some type of like supernatural experience. Where just connecting with people in a way that is more than just verbal. So it's
Would you say it's magic?
good. You could say it's magic. Yeah, I think this conversation has made me reanalyze my opinions on magic. Because often I'm just like, yeah, it's kind of silly. I'm like, I don't really believe in it, but yeah, I mean, I guess it's all a matter of like what you consider magic, and your perspective on what it is or what it should do or shouldn't do. And sometimes I think our opinions on things are based on Hollywood and TV, and people say this is magic, and it's like, well, no, that doesn't have to define.
Sometimes I think like things like Harry Potter are put there so we don't look any further. Like, just the same as it's like they can take a truth and wrap it in a cartoon and then we never look any further, because that's just silly Disney.
Yeah,
But look at how much of our whole reality is based on silly Disney.
that's so true. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're gonna have to do this again sometime in the near future.
Anytime, Ricky. Anytime. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Chaney. Enjoy the rest of your night. We'll keep in touch.
Okay. Bye.